The smell of bleach clung to her uniform long after she left the building each night. Angela Johnson had grown used to it, used to the sting of chemicals on her hands, the weight of the mop pressing against her shoulder, the creak of the cleaning cart as she pushed it across the marble floors of Glasswell and Company. For 15 years, she had been the janitor no one saw. Invisible, but always there. The executives passed her daily without even meeting her eyes. Some muttered half-hearted good mornings, but most simply walked around her as though she were a piece of furniture in the lobby. The CEO, Richard Alden, never even learned her name. To him, she was just a janitor, a fixture in the background of his empire. But Angela was no ordinary janitor. Beneath the plain uniform and rubber gloves, she carried a secret locked away for more than a decade. She wasn't just sweeping the halls of the company. She owned them. Each night, after the offices emptied and silence settled into the glass towers, Angela would pause her cleaning to sit in the executive boardroom. She'd run her hand across the long mahogany table, the leather chairs neatly tucked in, the city lights glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. No one knew that when the papers were signed 15 years ago, after a quiet inheritance and a series of strategic acquisitions, Angela Johnson became the silent majority shareholder of Glasswell and Company. But she never revealed it. Not yet. Instead, she chose to work among them, hidden in plain sight. She listened to conversations others ignored. She memorized boardroom gossip whispered in the hallways. She saw how people treated those they believed had no power. And no one underestimated her more than Richard Alden. Richard was everything Angela despised in a man, smug, entitled, and ruthless. He strutted through the building like a king surveying his kingdom. His suits were custom-made, his ties silk, his shoes shined so brightly you could see your reflection in them. To his subordinates, he was charming and charismatic. But Angela knew better. She had seen the other side of him, the sneers, the insults, the way he spoke down to receptionists, interns, and janitors alike. More than once, she had heard him make jokes at her expense. If ambition had a smell, he once told an executive, it wouldn't smell like bleach. His laughter had echoed across the lobby while Angela stood only a few feet away, scrubbing the marble tiles. She never flinched, never reacted. She only smiled faintly, keeping her secret locked away. But she never forgot. 15 years is a long time to wait. Long enough to watch a company grow fat under careless leadership. Long enough to see the rut spreading from the top down. And long enough to know that when the moment came, Richard Alden's empire would crumble with a single word from her lips. Angela had patience. What Richard didn't know was that every janitorial paycheck she collected, every floor she scrubbed, every insult she endured was a part of her plan. The day would come when the mop would be set aside, and the mask she'd worn for so long would fall. And on that day, Richard Alden would learn the truth. That the janitor he mocked, the woman he ignored, had always been his boss. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed above as Angela bent over her mop bucket, wringing out dirty water with practiced hands. Her back ached from years of physical work, but her mind was sharper than ever. She knew every creak of the building, every hidden corner where whispers floated between ambitious employees plotting their next promotion. Richard Alden's voice carried the loudest. He had a habit of walking through the halls barking orders into his Bluetooth headset. Everyone scattered at his approach. Everyone except Angela. She would simply step aside with her mop, eyes lowered, though she never missed a word. One evening, while she dusted near the boardroom, she overheard him laughing with his CFO. "She's been here forever, hasn't she?" Richard chuckled, nodding toward the lobby where Angela's cart sat parked. Same mop, same uniform, same sad little life. Some people just don't have ambition in their blood. The CFO laughed nervously, unsure if it was safe to join in. Richard continued anyway, emboldened by his own arrogance. "Imagine spending 15 years wiping other people's messes. I'd rather die than live like that." Angela's grip tightened around the duster. Her knuckles whitened, but her expression never changed. She had mastered the art of invisibility. What Richard didn't know was that Angela had already signed off on multiple expansions, approved mergers, and shifted investments through her proxies. Her fingerprints were everywhere in Glasswell and Company, just not where anyone could see them. She allowed Richard to believe he was the architect of success. In truth, she was a silent force steering the ship, watching as his ego inflated enough to blind him completely. Her choice to remain hidden had not been easy. There were nights she returned home exhausted, her teenage daughter asking why she insisted on living like this when she didn't need to. Angela would smile softly, brushing a hand over her daughter's hair. Sometimes the best power, she'd say, is a kind no one sees coming. But the years of patience came at a cost. Richard grew bolder, more careless. He cut corners for profit, ignored ethical concerns, and mistreated employees who didn't bow to him. He had turned Glasswell and Company into a playground for his vanity projects. And then came the moment that nearly broke Angela's patience. It was late, past midnight, when Richard stormed into the lobby, his silk tie loosened, his breath sour with expensive whiskey. Angela was polishing the brass handles of the glass doors when he noticed her. "You again," he slurred, smirking as if she was some recurring joke. "Tell me, Angela. Oh, wait, is that your name? Angela? Or do you prefer Custodian of the Century?" Angela kept her gaze on the handles, her reflection shimmering in the polished brass. "Good evening, Mr. Alden." Richard leaned against the doorframe, wagging a finger at her. "You know, you should be grateful. This company gives you a steady paycheck. Without me, you'd be nothing but a shadow scrubbing toilet somewhere else." Angela straightened slowly, her back tall despite the ache in her bones. For the briefest second, their eyes met, hers calm, his glazed with liquor and arrogance. "You're right about one thing," she said softly. "This company has given me everything." He laughed, assuming it was agreement, and stumbled toward the elevators. The doors closed behind him with a metallic thud. Angela's reflection in the glass doors remained, calm, unmoving, but in her eyes there was a storm brewing. Her patience was running out. The next morning, Richard arrived in the lobby with his usual entourage, 2 junior executives scrambling behind him with folders and coffee. His voice filled the space like a trumpet blast, sharp and commanding. Angela was on her knees scrubbing the marble tiles, her cart positioned between the elevators and the reception desk. Richard paused, looked down at her, and smirked. "You missed a spot," he said, pointing at an imaginary stain near his polished shoes. The executives chuckled awkwardly, eager to echo his humor. Angela only dipped her sponge back into the bucket, wiping the floor with unhurried strokes. She didn't give him the satisfaction of reacting. Richard shook his head in mock pity and stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, and his reflection disappeared. The executives, however, stayed behind a moment too long. "Can you believe she's still here?" one whispered to the other, unaware Angela could hear them perfectly. "I'd quit out of embarrassment if I were her." "She probably doesn't know how to do anything else," the other replied. Angela's lips curved into the faintest smile. People always reveal their true selves when they thought no one was listening. She had collected years of these remarks, small threads in a tapestry of arrogance. And now, she was beginning to weave them together into a weapon. That week, Angela began leaving her mop unattended a little longer near meeting rooms. She knew where the walls were thin, where the vents carried sound, where executives gathered to whisper about scandals Richard worked hard to bury. She learned about shady offshore accounts, about contracts signed with suppliers under investigation, about how Richard had silenced a harassment claim with a discreet settlement. Every detail was etched into her memory, later secured in files and recordings that no one knew she had. But Angela didn't act immediately. She waited. Waiting was her art. What pushed her closer to action was not Richard's arrogance, but his cruelty. One afternoon, a young receptionist named Claire spilled a tray of coffee near the boardroom door. Richard exploded in fury, berating her in front of half the office. His voice carried down the hall as Angela polished a brass railing nearby. "Do you know how much this suit costs?" he shouted, yanking off his stained jacket. "You're lucky I don't fire you on the spot. Pathetic. Utterly pathetic." Claire's eyes filled with tears. She stammered apologies, bending to clean the mess, but Richard shoved the tray aside with his foot and stormed off, leaving humiliation in his wake. Angela knelt beside the trembling young woman. "Don't let him break you," she whispered, sliding her a clean cloth. "Men like that fall harder than anyone." Claire blinked at her, surprised that the janitor offered kindness where the boss had given cruelty. Angela said no more. She rose, adjusted her uniform, and wheeled her cart away. But inside, her decision was solidifying. Richard Alden's time was running out. The empire he thought he ruled was about to reveal its true master. And when the moment came, the man who laughed at her for 15 years would beg for the very job he thought defined him. Angela's nights became a quiet hunt. She moved through the building like a ghost, mopping, sweeping, and polishing, but also watching, listening, and collecting. What others dismiss as janitorial routine was, in truth, reconnaissance. She discovered more than corruption. She uncovered Richard's desperation. Despite his arrogance, the company's numbers weren't as strong as he pretended. He had leveraged assets recklessly, funneled money into risky ventures, and manipulated quarterly reports to keep investors blind. To the outside world, Glasswell and Company gleamed. But behind closed doors, Richard Alden's kingdom was rotting. Angela kept it all. Emails, recordings, copies of documents left carelessly on printers. She had amassed an arsenal of truths that could gut him in a single blow. Still, she waited. The breaking point came on a stormy Thursday evening. Rain lashed against the glass walls of the skyscraper, thunder rattling the night. Angela was buffing the chrome elevator doors when she heard raised voices from the lobby. Richard was there, cornering Claire, the same receptionist he had humiliated weeks earlier. His tone was low, venomous, dripping with disdain. "You're lucky I even let you keep this job," he hissed. "You make one more mistake, and you'll be cleaning floors next to her." He jerked his thumb toward Angela, who was crouched nearby, cloth in hand. Claire's face crumpled. She nodded quickly, her voice trembling with apologies. Richard snatched the folder from her hands and stormed toward the elevators. Angela stood, cloth still in her grip. For the first time in 15 years, she didn't lower her gaze. She let him see her watching. Calm, silent, but unyielding. Richard sneered. "What? Got something to say, Janitor?" Angela wiped her hands on the cloth and met his eyes. "Not yet." The elevator doors closed, cutting off his puzzled frown. That night, Angela returned to the boardroom after everyone left. She placed her mop aside, sat at the head of the long mahogany table, and opened her leather-bound notebook. Inside were 15 years of notes, carefully organized, evidence stacked like ammunition. Her hand rested on a single folder, the final piece she had been waiting for. A transfer of funds. Illegal. Untraceable, unless you knew where to look. She had found it. Angela leaned back in the chair, the city lights flickering across her calm face. The time for patience had ended. Tomorrow, the janitor's mask would fall, and Richard Alden would learn the truth. The morning sun rose over the city, casting gold against the glass walls of Glasswell and Company. Inside, tension hummed like static. The executives had been summoned to an emergency board meeting. No one knew why. Richard Alden stood at the head of the table, confident as ever. His tailored suit was flawless, his smile sharp. "Let's keep this brief," he announced, tapping his pen against the polished wood. "We've got investors arriving next week, and I want numbers tight. No mistakes." The board members shifted uneasily. They had begun to sense cracks in Richard's control, but none dared speak. The doors opened. Every head turned. Angela Johnson stepped into the boardroom, dressed not in her janitor's uniform, but in a crisp black suit. Her hair was neatly styled, her presence commanding. In her hands, she carried a single leather folder. Whispers rippled through the room. "Isn't that the janitor?" Richard's jaw dropped. "What the hell is this?" he barked. "This room is for executives only." Angela walked the length of the table, her heels echoing on the floor. She stopped at the head chair, the chair Richard considered his throne, and she sat down, calm, poised, certain. Richard slammed his pen onto the table. "Get out before I have security drag you out." Angela opened the folder and spread the documents across the table. Bank statements, internal memos, proof of manipulated reports, transfers to offshore accounts. Every secret he thought buried now lay in plain sight. The room went silent. Angela's voice was steady, low but powerful. "For 15 years, I've watched you mock the people who keep this company running. You've humiliated employees. You've treated human beings as disposable. And all the while, you've bled this company dry." Richard's face reddened. "Who do you think you are?" Angela met his glare. "I'm the majority shareholder." This company has belonged to me since the day you first set foot in this building." The words hit the room like thunder. Gasps. Stunned silence. Richard staggered back, shaking his head. "That's impossible. You're a janitor." Angela finished, her tone edged with steel. "That's what you saw, because you never looked deeper. You never bothered to ask who I was. To you, I was invisible, and that was your biggest mistake." She pushed another document across the table, legal papers already signed, stamped, and sealed. "Effective immediately, Richard Alden, you are removed from your position as CEO." The board members erupted in whispers, some covering their mouths in shock, others exchanging glances of relief. Richard lunged forward, his voice cracking. "You can't do this. I built this company." Angela rose from her chair, standing taller than she ever had in her life. "No, you built your ego. I built this company. I kept it alive while you used it as your playground. And now it's over." Security entered the boardroom. For the first time in 15 years, Richard's power meant nothing. He shouted, cursed, threatened lawsuits, but the guards flanked him, guiding him toward the door. His final words echoed bitterly as he was dragged out. "You'll regret this." The doors closed. Silence fell. Angela looked around the table at the stunned faces of the executives. This company is going to change. No more arrogance. No more cruelty. We rebuild with respect, transparency, and vision. She gathered the documents, slipped them back into a folder, and turned toward the towering windows. The city stretched out before her, endless and alive. For 15 years, she had carried her secret like a weight. Today, it became her crown. The janitor was gone, the owner had arrived, and the empire was finally hers.